The park was quiet, the kind of place where people came to escape the noise of the world. Emily sat on the bench, her fingers gently flipping through the pages of her favorite book, a soft smile on her face. She loved these moments of peace, when time seemed to slow down and the world around her felt just right. The sun was warm, the trees swayed in the breeze, and the air smelled like fresh grass. But then, the calm was shattered. A group of teenagers, laughing and talking loudly, approached the bench. Emily didn't notice them at first. She was too lost in her book, too comfortable in her little world. But soon, their voices grew louder, and the sound of footsteps grew closer. She looked up just in time to see them standing around her, their eyes fixed on her in a way that made her heart skip a beat. One of the boys, a tall teenager with a cocky smirk, leaned in too close. "What are you reading, little girl?" he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. Emily's eyes flickered to the cover of her book, but she didn't say anything. She had been through this before, the stares, the whispers, the mocking laughter. It wasn't new to her, but it still hurt every time. Another girl from the group snatched the book from Emily's hands. "Ah, how cute," she mocked, flipping through the pages. "You really think anyone wants to see you reading? You're not like everyone else." The group laughed. Emily's stomach churned, but she didn't respond. She knew better than to get angry, to react. That's what they wanted. Instead, she just sat there, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes focused on the ground. The boy who had started it all pulled out his phone, pointing it at her. "Let's get a video of this," he said with a grin. "This is going to be hilarious. What do you think, guys? #Down syndrome fail?" The words hit Emily like a slap. She tried to shrink into herself, wishing she could just disappear, wishing she could block out the sounds of their cruel laughter. But no matter how much she wanted to escape, the reality of the situation was undeniable. What would you do if someone suddenly attacked your dignity in front of strangers? The question echoed in her mind, but Emily remained silent. She had learned long ago that no matter how hard she tried, people like this weren't going to understand her. They didn't care about her struggles or her journey. They only saw what they wanted to see, someone to pick on, someone to belittle. The laughter continued, but just as Emily felt the walls closing in around her, something unexpected happened. A voice, calm and firm, cut through the chaos. "Hey, leave her alone." Emily looked up in confusion. The group of teenagers froze, their laughter fading as they turned to face the newcomer. Standing there, just a few feet away, was none other than Keanu Reeves. The famous actor, the one whose face was plastered on billboards and whose movies had captivated audiences all over the world, was now standing in front of her. He wasn't in a suit or on a movie set, he was just a man, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, with a quiet intensity in his eyes that immediately commanded attention. The teenagers stood in stunned silence. Emily could hardly believe what was happening. Was this a dream? Was this really happening? Keanu took a step forward, his gaze never leaving the group of teenagers. "You don't get to treat someone like that," he said, his voice unwavering. "Not here. Not anywhere." The group hesitated, unsure of how to respond to someone they never expected to be involved in this moment. The phone that had been aimed at Emily now lowered, and the awkward tension in the air thickened. "Now, I'm going to ask you all to walk away," Keanu continued, his words steady and calm. "And if I see any of you picking on her again, I'll make sure you regret it." It wasn't a threat, but rather a promise, one that made the teens realize the seriousness of the situation. Slowly, they started to back away, their eyes wide with disbelief. It was clear they didn't know how to react to an unexpected confrontation with a celebrity who stood up for what was right. As they turned and walked off, Keanu turned back to Emily. His expression softened. "You all right?" he asked gently. Emily nodded, still in shock, unsure whether this was real or just a surreal moment in time. She couldn't find the words, but she felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time that day, she didn't feel invisible. Keanu smiled, offering her a hand. Don't let people like that make you feel small. You matter. You always matter. Emily's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next few days were peaceful, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling of unease that still lingered. While the events in the park had unfolded in ways she never expected, she knew deep down that the real battle wasn't over. It was the battle that raged inside her, the conflict between what she wanted to believe about herself and the harsh reality that the world wasn't always kind. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of her alarm ringing in her ears. It was a typical weekday, and after breakfast, Emily went to work at the local bakery, a job she'd held for a few years now. The warm, comforting smells of fresh bread and pastries filled the air as she moved around the kitchen, wrapping up treats and helping customers. But even in the midst of this routine, something inside her felt different. She hadn't forgotten about the teens. She hadn't forgotten about the humiliation, the cruel words that had cut deep into her heart. They had attacked her just because she was different, just because they could. The support from Keanu had been like a flicker of light in the darkness, but she knew the world would always have its share of darkness. And that darkness wasn't just in the people who bullied her, it was in the fears and doubts she carried within herself. Emily, could you come over here for a second? Her boss, Margaret, a kind woman with graying hair and an ever-welcoming smile, waved her over to the counter. Emily walked over, smiling nervously, still lost in her own thoughts. You okay today, dear? Margaret asked, noticing the far-off look in Emily's eyes. You seem a bit distracted. Emily hesitated, her fingers playing with the edge of her apron. She had always been an open book when it came to Margaret, but this was different. She wasn't sure if she was ready to talk about what had happened. I'm fine, Emily said with a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Just a little tired, I guess. Margaret studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. But you know, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. Emily gave a quick nod before returning to her work, but the weight of Margaret's words lingered. The tension inside her was growing stronger. She hated feeling like this, like she was trapped in a cycle of pain and fear. She wanted to be strong, to move forward and let the past go, but it wasn't that easy. As the day passed and the sun started to set, Emily was preparing to leave for the day when her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it, expecting it to be a text from her mom, but when she unlocked the screen, her stomach sank. There it was, another video. The same group of teenagers had posted something online, and the thumbnail featured none other than Emily herself. The title read, Keanu Reeves saves a Down syndrome girl, but her behavior is beyond cringe. Emily's heart dropped. She clicked on it, watching in stunned silence as the video began. It wasn't long, it was only about a minute or so, but it didn't need to be longer. The footage showed her sitting in the park, the group surrounding her, mocking her. The boy who had bullied her even commented on the video, making fun of her for being so fragile, as though she couldn't handle herself without someone like Keanu coming to her rescue. She felt a sickening mixture of anger and shame flood through her. What was the point of this? Why did they feel the need to degrade her in front of everyone? Hadn't she been through enough already? But as she watched, something unexpected happened. Her fingers hovered over the like button, but her eyes caught something else in the video. Keanu, standing tall, had spoken out. His words were powerful. Even though the teens had made a mockery of her, he had stood up for her, he had made them back off. And in that moment, Emily realized something. Keanu hadn't done it because he thought she needed saving. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. The tears she hadn't even realized she'd been holding back started to fall. But they weren't tears of shame or sadness. They were tears of anger and of understanding. She wasn't going to let these bullies have control over her life anymore. She wasn't going to let their cruelty define her. But as she wiped her tears, a new feeling began to rise within her: determination. This wasn't the end of her story. She would stand tall, just like Keanu had. She would confront her fears and the bullying, and she would find her own way of dealing with it. It was time for Emily to take control of her own narrative. The next day, Emily woke up early. She had a plan in mind. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. Her confidence had taken a hit from the bullying, but now she realized it was time to rebuild it. She couldn't keep letting these people, these faceless bullies, have the power to dictate her life. She had seen the way Keanu had walked into her life and made an impact just by standing up for what was right. Emily wasn't a celebrity, and she didn't have his fame, but she did have something just as powerful: her voice. She would find a way to fight back, to rise above this cruelty. Maybe it wouldn't be through a viral video or a public act of heroism. Maybe it would be through small steps, standing tall in the face of bullying, refusing to stay silent when she was mistreated. With a deep breath, Emily stood up from her bed and made her way to the bathroom. She didn't know exactly how she was going to do it, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let the bullies win. Not this time. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Emily. Every time she thought about what had happened, her heart raced. There was still a part of her that wanted to turn away from it all, to let the bullying slide, to let it pass like a storm. But she knew deep down that she couldn't just keep running. She had to face it head-on. She spent her days working at the bakery, trying to push the thoughts of the bullying out of her mind. But there was always that nagging feeling, that voice telling her she wasn't good enough. Her coworkers had noticed the shift in her mood, but Emily hadn't been ready to open up yet. It wasn't something she could just talk about with anyone. It felt too personal, too raw. One afternoon, as Emily was wiping down a counter, the bell above the bakery door jingled. She looked up, expecting it to be a regular customer, but when she saw who it was, her breath caught in her throat. Standing in the doorway was Keanu Reeves. Emily froze, unsure of what to do. Was this a dream? Why was he here? Keanu smiled warmly, his familiar presence giving her a sense of calm despite the confusion that swirled inside her. He wasn't in character or on set, he was just the man who had defended her in the park. "Hi, Emily," he said softly, his voice steady but kind. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to stop by and check in on you." Emily blinked a few times, trying to process what was happening. You came here to see me?" Keanu nodded. "I did. I know things have been rough for you lately, and I just wanted to let you know that you're not alone. I know I can't fix everything, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had never expected someone like him to care this much. He wasn't some random celebrity, he was Keanu Reeves, a man with his own life and responsibilities. But there he was, standing in front of her, offering support. I don't know what to say," Emily said, her voice small but sincere. "You don't have to say anything," Keanu replied. "I just want you to know that it's okay to feel how you feel. You've been through a lot, and it's normal to struggle. But I believe in you." For the first time in a long time, Emily felt the weight in her chest lighten. It wasn't a complete release, but it was enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, she could get through this. "Thanks," she whispered, wiping away a stray tear that had escaped down her cheek. Keanu smiled gently, then glanced around the bakery. "This place is great. You must be proud of it." Emily laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. "Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's mine. It's my little corner of the world." Keanu nodded, his eyes thoughtful. Sometimes, it's the little things that matter most. The things that we pour our heart into. And I can tell you put your heart into this. Emily's heart swelled at his words. It was strange, hearing someone like Keanu speak to her like this. But it was also exactly what she needed. She wasn't just a person to be pitied. She wasn't just the girl who needed someone to stand up for her, she was capable of standing up for herself. I really appreciate you coming by, she said, her voice stronger now. It means a lot. Keanu smiled, his eyes warm and reassuring. Anytime, Emily. Anytime. As he turned to leave, Emily watched him go, feeling a renewed sense of hope. She wasn't sure how to process everything that had just happened, but one thing was certain, Keanu had given her a gift that she could never fully repay, belief in herself. As the door jingled shut behind him, Emily stood still for a moment, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. She had a long way to go. The bullying was still out there, and the shame still lingered in the back of her mind. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into that park days ago. Emily was stronger now. She was beginning to see herself in a way she never had before. She wasn't just the victim in her own story, she was the hero. Later that night, as Emily sat on her couch, scrolling through social media to unwind, she saw the video again. The one the teens had posted. But this time, her perspective had changed. Instead of cringing at the insults and mocking comments, she focused on the moment when Keanu had stepped in. She watched him with a newfound understanding. He wasn't just a celebrity, he was a man who believed in doing the right thing. And maybe that was what she needed to do, too. To stand up for herself, to defend what was right, even when it was hard. She smiled to herself, closing the video with a sense of finality. No more hiding. No more letting people walk all over her. Tomorrow, she would take another step forward. And the next day, she would take another. Until one day, the bullies wouldn't matter anymore. She would have her own story to tell, a story that was stronger than any insult or any video. A story that was hers, and hers alone. The next morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight streamed through her window, casting a soft glow over the room. For the first time in a while, she felt a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in years. She knew there was still a long way to go, but her perspective had shifted. With Keanu's words ringing in her mind, Emily had made a decision. She was going to stop being a passive character in her own life. She was going to take control. After breakfast, Emily slipped on her sneakers and stepped outside, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment of peace before stepping forward. There was a local community center that she had passed by many times but had never really thought to explore. It was a place that often advertised support groups, events, and activities for people of all kinds, whether you were looking for help with a personal struggle or just wanting to meet others. Today, it felt like the right place for Emily to start. As she walked through the doors of the community center, her nerves tingled. She hadn't known what to expect, but she had hoped she might find someone who could help her navigate this new chapter of her life. The receptionist, a cheerful woman with short brown hair, smiled at Emily as she entered. "Hi. How can I help you today?" "I'm Emily," she said, her voice steady, but there was still a slight tremor in it. "I was wondering if you have any programs for people who have been, well, bullied. Or for people who just need to talk about their experiences." The receptionist's eyes softened immediately. "Of course. We actually have a few support groups for people who are going through similar things. One meets every Wednesday. Would you like me to sign you up?" Emily hesitated for just a moment. She had never been someone who opened up easily to strangers, especially about something so personal. But something inside her told her it was time. Time to stop keeping everything locked away. "Yes, Please, she said, nodding. I think I'd like to try that. As the receptionist signed her up, Emily felt a sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She was taking a step toward healing, toward finding a place where she could learn to trust herself again. The support group was held that Wednesday evening in a small, comfortable room filled with mismatched chairs. Emily wasn't sure what to expect, but when she walked in, she immediately felt a sense of solidarity from the other participants. There were 5 people in total, all sitting in a circle. Each person had a story, each one a different journey, but all connected by the same thread, feeling different, feeling alienated, or feeling as though the world didn't always have a place for them. After the introductions, Emily was invited to share her story. At first, she felt the weight of the moment. But as she spoke, she felt her voice grow stronger, the words coming more easily than she had imagined. I've been bullied, she began, her hands shaking slightly as she clasped them in her lap. I guess that's not a surprise. But what really got to me was how they treated me, like I was less than them. Like I didn't deserve respect. And the worst part is, I started to believe them. She paused, looking around the room at the other faces, each one nodding, understanding her pain. But then something happened. A celebrity, Keanu Reeves, he stood up for me. And that moment changed everything. It wasn't about him saving me. It was about me realizing that I didn't need to be saved. I could stand up for myself. I had the power to decide who I was, who I wanted to be. One of the women, a kind-looking older woman with glasses, smiled gently. You do have that power, Emily. And I know it's not easy. We all have our battles. But taking control of your own story is the first step in changing your life. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel like the world was against her. She was surrounded by people who understood her, who had walked their own difficult paths and had come out stronger. The weeks that followed were transformative for Emily. She continued attending the support group, where she found comfort in the shared experiences of others. Little by little, the weight that had once pressed so heavily on her chest started to lift. She was finding her voice, and it wasn't just for others, it was for herself. At the bakery, Emily's confidence began to shine through as well. She had once felt self-conscious serving customers, worrying about what they might think of her. But now, she was able to greet them with a smile, to talk to them without fear of judgment. Her co-workers noticed the change, and Margaret, her boss, even commented on how much more at ease she seemed. You're glowing, Emily, Margaret said one day, pulling her aside. You're doing great. Emily smiled, a little surprised by the compliment, but it felt genuine. Thanks, Margaret. I think I'm starting to understand that I can handle things. That I don't have to let fear control me. And the most important change of all, Emily started to forgive herself. She had spent so much of her life thinking she wasn't enough, too different, too sensitive, too fragile. But now, she understood that she was strong, not despite her differences, but because of them. One day, as Emily was heading home from the bakery, her phone buzzed with a message from a familiar number. It was from Keanu. Hi, Emily. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I know it's been a while, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you for everything you've been doing. You've got this. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she read the message. It wasn't the message itself, it was the fact that he had taken the time to reach out. It was a reminder that even in the toughest times, there were people who cared, people who believed in her. She smiled and typed back. Thanks, Keanu. I'm doing better. One step at a time. And that was the truth. Emily was taking it one step at a time, and though there would always be challenges ahead, she knew she could face them with the strength she had discovered within herself. The days seemed to blur together as Emily continued to navigate this newfound path of self-discovery. She had always been someone who tried to fit into the mold of what others expected of her. But now, she was breaking free from that mold, learning to trust herself and embrace her true identity. But not everything had been easy. The bullies, while not as loud or visible as before, still lingered in the corners of her mind. Their cruel words and mocking laughter had left a scar, and no amount of support or self-assurance could erase that pain. The hurt, though less sharp now, was still there. And sometimes, just when she thought she had fully moved on, it would resurface. It was one of those days when the doubts crept in again. Emily had been feeling good about her progress, until she saw it. She was scrolling through her social media, trying to unwind after a long shift at the bakery, when she stumbled upon the video again. It was the one that had started it all, the one where the bullies had targeted her in the park. The video was still circulating, and the comments were as vile as ever. "She's too sensitive. Why does she even care? It's just a joke. She'll never make it." A sharp pang of frustration and sadness hit her chest. Why was this still happening? Why couldn't people just let it go? She had done her best to move on, but seeing the same faces, reading the same comments, it all felt like a fresh wound. She set her phone down, staring at the ceiling. The anger inside her started to bubble up, but this time, instead of retreating into herself, she leaned into it. She was tired of being the victim. Tired of letting other people dictate how she felt. She thought back to what Keanu had said, "You're stronger than you know." And maybe she was. Maybe it was time for her to take control of this story, to stop letting it define her. That's when she made a decision. The next day, Emily went to the bakery, and as usual, Margaret greeted her with a smile. "Good morning, Emily. How's everything going?" "Good," Emily said, though she didn't feel like it. She had something on her mind, something she couldn't keep bottled up anymore. "Actually, Margaret, I was wondering if I could take the afternoon off tomorrow." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Of course. You've been working hard. Is everything all right?" Emily hesitated. She wanted to explain it all, the anger, the hurt, the need to do something. But instead, she nodded. "Yeah, I need to do something for myself. Something big." Margaret gave her a supportive look. "Take all the time you need. I'll cover for you." With that, Emily took a deep breath. Tomorrow was the day. She had a plan. The following afternoon, Emily stood in front of the community center again, the familiar nervousness creeping up. She hadn't come here for just another support group meeting. This time, she was going to speak out. She had decided it was time to confront the bullies, not in person, but in a way that would reach them. She had a story to share, a message to send. Emily had spent hours writing down her thoughts, her feelings, and everything that had happened. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was something she had to do. She had always been afraid of speaking out, afraid of the backlash, but now, it felt like the only way to take back control. Walking into the small meeting room, Emily felt the weight of the room's energy shift when she entered. The support group was there, but today, the atmosphere was different. Emily was different. She took her place in the circle, her heart pounding as she adjusted the paper in her hands. The group had already begun their usual round of check-ins, but Emily couldn't wait any longer. She had to do this. "Hey," she started, her voice a little shaky but steadying with each word, "I wanted to share something today. It's something I've been holding on to for a while." The group fell silent, their eyes on her with encouraging warmth. "I've been bullied," she continued, pausing to take a deep breath. "And I've kept it inside for so long, because I didn't want to be seen as weak. I thought if I just ignored it, it would go away. But it hasn't. And it won't." She looked down at her paper, her hands trembling. But instead of looking away, she focused on the words she had written. She had to keep going. I saw the video again. The one where they laughed at me in the park. And every time I see it, it hurts. But it also makes me angry. Angry at them, sure. But more than that, angry at myself for letting it control me for so long. I've let their words become my truth. But I'm done with that. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I don't need to be saved. I'm not broken. I'm not the girl in that video anymore. I'm someone who is learning to stand up for myself. To speak out. And I want to share that story. Not for revenge. Not for sympathy. But because I want to show others who might feel like I did, that they don't have to stay silent. Emily paused again, letting the silence in the room settle. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew she had done something important. Something that mattered. One by one, the group members nodded, their faces filled with understanding. You're not alone, one of the women said softly. And you don't have to carry this alone anymore. Emily smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. She hadn't expected the world to change in an instant, but she knew that she had taken the first step. She had put her story out there, and in doing so, she had reclaimed a piece of herself. That evening, as Emily returned home, she felt lighter. It was as though a burden she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted. She was finally starting to heal, piece by piece, and that healing was something no one could take from her. As she sat down to dinner, her phone buzzed with another message. It was from Keanu. I saw your post. I just want you to know, I'm proud of you for speaking out. That's a huge step, and I know you've got the strength to keep moving forward. Take care, Emily. You're not alone in this. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she read his words. He didn't have to say it, but somehow, his message made her feel like she mattered. It reminded her that even when the world seemed overwhelming, there were people, both near and far, who cared. And with that, Emily knew she was ready for whatever came next. Because, no matter what, she had the strength to face it. The days continued to pass by with a newfound rhythm in Emily's life. She had spent so much of her time waiting for something to change, but now, it felt as though change was happening inside her, slowly but surely. The community center meetings had become a lifeline. Every week, she learned something new about herself, and with each session, the sense of strength she had been searching for started to solidify. However, it wasn't just the support group that had shifted her mindset. It was her own resilience, her ability to embrace the challenges, and the way she had started reclaiming parts of herself that had been hidden for so long. Every morning, when Emily woke up and looked in the mirror, she saw someone different. She saw someone who was no longer afraid to be seen. But even with all the progress she had made, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something missing, a final piece she hadn't quite put together yet. She wasn't sure what it was, but she was determined to keep moving forward, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. That was when the unexpected call came. It was a Friday afternoon. Emily was just finishing her shift at the bakery when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, puzzled by the number. It wasn't one she recognized, but something about it made her answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. "Emily," the voice on the other end asked, with a calm, familiar tone. "This is Keanu." For a moment, Emily froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from Keanu in weeks, and here he was, calling her out of the blue. She felt a wave of warmth rush over her, like a comfort she hadn't realized she needed until now. "Oh my gosh, Keanu." "Hi," she stammered, trying to keep her composure. I didn't expect to hear from you." He chuckled lightly, and she could almost hear the smile in his voice. I know. It's been a while. But I've been following your story, Emily. I've seen the posts, and I've heard about your progress. You've been doing an incredible job." Emily's heart swelled. She hadn't expected this level of acknowledgement from someone she barely knew. But his words felt genuine, like he was truly invested in her journey. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "That means a lot to me, Keanu. I'm really trying to, move forward. It's not easy, but I feel like I'm finally starting to get there." Keanu's voice grew serious. "I've been thinking about what you've been through, and I wanted to ask, how would you feel about sharing your story in a bigger way? I know it might be a little scary, but I think your story could really inspire others. There's something powerful about what you've gone through and how you're rising above it. It could make a real impact." Emily was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She hadn't imagined speaking out on a larger scale, especially not beyond the support group, and certainly not on a platform where so many people could see her. But something about his suggestion felt right. "Are you serious?" she finally asked, still processing his offer. "I am," Keanu replied. "I know this might sound crazy, but I've seen the way people respond to stories like yours. And I believe you have a unique perspective to offer. If you're open to it, we could get together and talk about the possibility of putting your story out there, maybe a video, a podcast, or even a social media campaign." Emily's mind raced. A video? A podcast? It sounded like such a huge leap, one that she hadn't even considered. But there was something deep inside her that said this could be her moment. Her opportunity to make a real difference. She glanced around the bakery, her eyes catching the familiar sights of the pastry cases and the warm ovens. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had changed in such a short time. And then, she thought about all the people out there who might need to hear her story. "I'd like that," Emily said, her voice growing more confident. "I'd like to give it a try. I think it could help." Keanu's voice softened with appreciation. "I'm really proud of you, Emily. I know this isn't easy, but you're stronger than you think. Let's figure out a time to meet and discuss the next steps. You're going to do amazing things." As they wrapped up the call, Emily felt a surge of energy run through her. She had no idea what this would lead to, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the edge of something big. Something that could change everything, not just for her, but for others too. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Emily spent time researching what it would take to share her story in a public way. She practiced speaking in front of the mirror, recording herself talking about her experiences, her emotions, and her growth. The process was nerve-wracking, but with each practice session, she grew more comfortable with the idea. Keanu reached out several times to check in, offering encouragement and advice. He helped her refine her message and even suggested a few different ways to present it, whether through a short documentary or a powerful Instagram post. He made sure she felt ready, never rushing her but always assuring her that she had the strength to do it. Finally, the day arrived. Emily was standing in front of a camera, her heart pounding in her chest. She had chosen a quiet corner of the community center, a place that had become so important to her over the past few months. It was where she had started her journey, and now, it was where she would take the next step. Keanu was there, along with a small production team to help with the setup. He gave her a reassuring smile as he positioned the camera. "You've got this, Emily. Just speak from the heart." Emily nodded, her palms slightly sweaty as she took a deep breath. She knew what she wanted to say. She had rehearsed it, thought about it endlessly, and now it was time to share her truth. The camera rolled, and for the first time, Emily began to speak openly about her struggles with bullying, how it had made her feel small and invisible, and how she had learned to rise above it. She spoke about the strength she had found within herself and how she wanted to inspire others to find their own strength, no matter what they faced. And as the words flowed, Emily realized something. She wasn't just speaking for others. She was speaking for herself, claiming her voice, her worth, and her place in the world. The days after Emily's video went live were a whirlwind of activity. She had expected some attention. After all, Keanu Reeves had been involved, and the topic of her story was deeply personal, but she had no idea just how much of an impact it would have. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world began sharing her video, leaving messages of support and appreciation. Social media platforms exploded with comments from individuals who had gone through similar struggles. Some shared their own stories of bullying and how they were finding the courage to overcome it, inspired by Emily's words. Others simply expressed their admiration for her bravery. "Your story has inspired me to stop hiding," one message read. "Thank you for showing me that it's okay to speak out. I was bullied too, and your video helped me realize I'm not alone," another comment said. "You're so strong, Emily. Thank you for sharing." And then there were the private messages. Dozens of them. Some from strangers, some from people Emily knew. Some just wanted to tell her they were proud of her. Others shared their own personal experiences and asked for advice. She responded to as many as she could, offering words of encouragement, just as she had received from Keanu. For the first time, Emily felt like she was truly part of something bigger, a community of people who understood, who cared, and who were ready to rise above their struggles together. But the attention wasn't all positive. There were still the trolls, the people who took pleasure in tearing others down. Emily had expected them, of course. The internet had a way of amplifying both the good and the bad. The comments on her video weren't all kind. Some people tried to mock her, calling her weak or pretending her story didn't matter. At first, the negative comments stung. But as the days went on, Emily began to realize that those voices didn't define her. The support and the stories of triumph that filled her inbox meant far more than the few cruel words that came her way. She had the power to choose where she focused her energy. Keanu reached out to check in, as he had been doing ever since the video went live. "Hey Emily, how's everything going?" he asked. "I've been reading the comments and I'm just amazed by how many people your story has touched. You've done something incredible." Emily smiled as she typed her response. "It's been overwhelming, Keanu. I didn't expect so many people to reach out. But I'm grateful. It feels like something is shifting." "I'm so proud of you," he replied quickly. "And I know this is just the beginning for you. Keep pushing forward." Emily felt a sense of calm wash over her as she read his message. It was true, this was just the beginning. She had taken the first step, and now, she had the opportunity to continue making a difference. The ripple effect of her story was still spreading, and it wasn't just limited to the people who saw her video. It was spreading to every person who heard her message and found the courage to face their own battles. One afternoon, a few weeks after the video had gone viral, Emily received an unexpected invitation. It was from a non-profit organization that focused on advocating for individuals with disabilities and promoting inclusivity. They had seen her story online and wanted to feature her as a keynote speaker at an upcoming event. At first, Emily couldn't believe it. A keynote speaker? It was one thing to share her story on social media, but to stand in front of an audience of hundreds, she wasn't sure she was ready for that. But as she read through the invitation, she realized that this was a new opportunity for growth. This was another way for her to take her message beyond the confines of her phone screen and connect with people in person. The event was scheduled for 2 months away, which gave her plenty of time to prepare. But Emily knew that this was more than just a speaking opportunity. It was another chance for her to challenge herself, to push past the fear that had always held her back. She called Keanu for advice. "Keanu, they want me to speak at this big event. I don't know if I'm ready for something like that. It's one thing to make a video, but standing in front of a crowd, what if I freeze?" she confessed. Keanu's voice was reassuring. "You've already done the hardest part, Emily. You've shared your truth with the world. Speaking in front of an audience is just the next step. They want to hear from you because your story matters. You're not alone in this, there's a community of people who want to hear what you have to say. I'm scared, Emily admitted. But I don't want fear to stop me. I want to do this, for them, and for myself. That's the spirit, Keanu said, sounding genuinely excited for her. Take your time. You'll be great. As the weeks passed, Emily worked diligently on her speech. She practiced in front of the mirror, recorded herself speaking, and even asked her friends and family to give feedback. With each practice session, she gained more confidence. She focused on the message she wanted to deliver, about the strength to overcome bullying, the power of community, and the importance of embracing your true self. The night before the event, Emily felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She couldn't believe how far she had come. From the shy, self-doubting girl she had once been to the confident woman who was about to speak in front of hundreds, she had transformed in ways she never thought possible. She stood in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and smiled. "I've got this," she whispered to herself. The day of the event arrived, and Emily stood backstage, waiting for her turn. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation, and she could hear snippets of conversations from the audience. Some were excited to hear her story, others were there to learn more about the work the nonprofit was doing. But all she could focus on was the moment ahead, her moment to speak. Finally, her name was called. As she walked onto the stage, the room grew quiet. The bright lights above made it difficult to see the faces of the audience, but Emily could feel their attention on her. She stood tall, holding the microphone in both hands, and looked out at the sea of faces before her. The nerves that had once threatened to overwhelm her had settled into a quiet calm. "This is my story," she began, her voice steady, "and I hope that by sharing it, you'll know that you are not alone." As Emily finished her speech, the room erupted into applause. She had done it. She had shared her truth in front of a crowd, and in doing so, she had created another ripple, one that would inspire others to find their own courage. She wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was part of a movement. And as she walked off the stage, the overwhelming feeling of accomplishment washed over her. The journey was far from over, but Emily knew one thing for certain: she was ready for whatever came next. The following months were a whirlwind of opportunities and challenges. Emily's journey from a shy woman with a past filled with bullying to a confident speaker and advocate for people with disabilities was nothing short of transformative. Her speech at the nonprofit event had been just the beginning. Soon, Emily was invited to participate in more events, podcasts, and interviews. She had become a voice for those who felt unseen and unheard, and her story resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the small cafe near her apartment, she reflected on how far she had come. The cafe had become a quiet retreat for her, a place where she could sit with a cup of tea, gather her thoughts, and prepare for the next chapter of her journey. She had spent so many years hiding from the world, afraid of how others might perceive her because of her Down syndrome. But now, she was speaking out, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt like an outsider. The more she spoke, the more she realized that her voice could truly make a difference. Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up and saw that it was a message from Keanu. "Keanu, hey Emily. Got some exciting news. There's a documentary filmmaker who's interested in telling your story. She's worked on some big projects and thinks your story could be incredible. Want to meet and talk it through?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. A documentary? She had never considered something like that before. But the idea of her story being shared on such a large scale, the thought of inspiring even more people, was both thrilling and terrifying. She took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the screen. A few months ago, the idea of speaking in front of a crowd had felt impossible. Now, she was being asked to be part of something much bigger. She thought back to her first video, the one that had started it all, and how she had felt then, nervous, uncertain, but determined to move forward. Without hesitating, she typed her response. "Emily, let's do it. I'm ready to meet her." The next day, Emily met with the documentary filmmaker, a woman named Sarah, at a local coffee shop. Sarah was warm and welcoming, and she immediately put Emily at ease. As they sat down together, Sarah explained her vision for the documentary. "We're looking to tell the story of someone who has faced adversity and overcome it," Sarah explained. "Your journey has been nothing short of remarkable, and I think it could help change the way people view Down syndrome and bullying. It's about showing the world what it means to truly find your voice." Emily listened intently, her mind racing with the possibilities. The idea of being part of something so impactful was daunting, but at the same time, it felt like the perfect next step. "I've never thought about having my story told this way," Emily admitted. "But I think it could help people. If it inspires even one person to stop hiding and start living, it'll be worth it." Sarah smiled, nodding. "I believe it will, Emily. You've already inspired so many people, and this documentary will only amplify that." As they discussed the logistics of the project, Emily began to feel more and more excited about the idea. She knew it wouldn't be easy, it would require more vulnerability and openness than she had ever given before, but she also knew it was her chance to make a lasting impact. To show the world that Down syndrome didn't define her, and that the struggles she had faced were just stepping stones on the path to something greater. Weeks passed as Emily worked closely with Sarah and the film crew. They filmed interviews, captured candid moments of her daily life, and documented her continued efforts to raise awareness about bullying and inclusivity. The process was emotionally exhausting at times, but Emily found strength in knowing that this documentary would not only tell her story but also shed light on the stories of so many others who had faced similar challenges. Through it all, Keanu continued to be a source of support and encouragement. They talked frequently about the progress of the documentary, and Keanu even made a surprise appearance on set one day to offer some words of encouragement. "Emily," he said, standing before the camera, "I've watched you grow in ways I never imagined. You're not just telling your story, you're giving people the tools to rise above their own struggles. That's powerful." The camera captured the raw emotion in Emily's face as she nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. She had never imagined she would find herself standing in front of a camera, but now, it felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The documentary premiered at a film festival, and Emily was invited to attend as a special guest. As she walked the red carpet, she felt a sense of disbelief. The girl who had once been terrified of speaking up was now a public figure, standing before photographers, journalists, and a crowd of eager fans. Keanu was there, of course, by her side, offering words of encouragement and even helping her navigate the media frenzy. He smiled at her as they made their way into the theater. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice filled with pride. Emily smiled back, her heart full of gratitude. "I never could have done this without you." As the documentary began, Emily sat in the audience with her family and friends, watching the story of her life unfold on the big screen. It wasn't just her journey, it was the journey of anyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. And as the film came to an end, the audience rose to their feet in applause. In that moment, Emily knew that her journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. As the months went by, Emily continued to advocate for those with disabilities and spread her message of resilience and strength. The documentary had reached millions, and Emily's voice had become a beacon of hope for so many. But despite the fame and recognition, she never lost sight of what truly mattered: helping others, showing them that they weren't alone, and encouraging them to rise above the challenges they faced. She had once been a woman who struggled to find her voice. Now, she was a woman who used her voice to lift others up. And as she stood on stage at a conference, speaking to an audience of thousands, Emily realized that the unexpected entrance of Keanu Reeves, along with her own courage, had set her on a path that would change not just her life, but the lives of many others. In the end, it wasn't just the bullies who had underestimated her, it was the world itself. And Emily was determined to show them all that she was more than they ever thought possible. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?